let's talk now about patient advocacy and patients on board. Um, you are very, it's important to you to make sure that you have patients directly involved in the decision-making process, having patients on advisory boards.
Right. Yeah,
And
absolutely. And so I don't remember the woman's name, but I was down in Washington, D.C., and we were chatting, and I was saying, how can a pharmaceutical company say it's all about you, but yet there's none of you on the board, right? So, and don't get me wrong, these people that they have out there supporting, working for the pharmaceuticals are the most amazing people. But you don't know what happens, right? So, you talk to one person who talks to another person. How many levels down are they from the decision makers? And
mhm.
the answer is, from research we've done, is at a minimum 4 or 5, and a lot of times a lot more than that. And I always looked at it. Remember that game you played when you were in like first grade, and a teacher would whisper something into your ear, and then you whispered into the next ear, and they whispered,
Mhm.
and by the time it comes back, it's a whole different. Like you would never know what the
Right.
first thing says.
Telephone game or something. Yeah.
Right, right. So,
Yeah.
so I think so much of this case, like when I started getting into the advocacy, um, I would just keep immediately thinking about what went wrong, what didn't happen. And a big part of it was, you start with the HMO, and not only were you not part of this of an advisory board or anything, but you were part of nothing. They told you what was going to happen, and I knew that was wrong, right? I knew from my wife that this is not the best way to do medicine, and certainly not telling you what your treatments are going to be for the next year or two, before they did the first treatment there. And it drove us to it drove me, and my wife was always there for me, supporting me, to realize, hey, we've got to do something that's different, right? I, you know, there's got to be. I always say, no matter what, there's there's good that comes out of it, no matter how bad. And with this, it was the exact same thing. And if I went up to someone who had an incurable cancer before I had cancer, and they said, I feel very fortunate, I would have said, that guy is so full of what. He has an incurable cancer and he feels fortunate. And there's so many reasons, right? After the, oh my God, I'm going to die, and then being just so furious at the world because it's not fair. You're a good person and bad people are living to 100 and all. So, in the beginning, nobody knew me. They didn't know who I was or whatever. So I certainly was, not going to be chosen to be on an advisory board. I didn't even know they were out there for this type of thing at that time. But I did know that I could help people, right? And I started out just speaking about this, right? After that miraculous first clinical trial, um, I knew that people could learn from what had happened to me and from the teachings. And that said, I had to be very careful because if I went up to the average person and said I was on teclistamab and in 48 hours my cancer was 99% gone, a majority of them would say to their doctor, yeah, I don't care what you think. I heard about this one, and that's what I want to be on. And obviously, treatments work different with different people. So,
Yeah.
kind of trying to share those messages, teach people some of the stuff in these talks that helped me. That a great one was, like I was talking about before, the talk or the discussion my wife had with our first oncologist. I'd like to think I wouldn't have accepted that, but my brain was in a different place at that time. So who really knows?
Mhm.
And it just turned out to be something I was so thankful for that I really felt, you know what, even if it was 10 people that I affected, it would have been worth it for me.
Mhm.
And it's interesting the level of knowledge. I spoke for the first talk was with Johnson and Johnson after after it was approved and it became Tech Valley. And I was at this meeting. Now it was a strategic offsite, right? So they picked me up, drove me up there. I was at the meeting. I spoke. We had some drinks afterwards, and then I had to leave, right? Because it's a high-level strategic meeting. Um, and one of the questions I got at the end, you never knew who was asking them because they all wrote the question down and handed it to someone, was, have you ever had a bone marrow biopsy? And if so, what was it like? And I remember saying something like, it wasn't fun, right? I said, I was scared to death of them because of what I've heard. And I said, literally 98% of it is uncomfortable, right? They could numb your flesh, they could numb the outside of the bone, they just couldn't numb the inside of the bone.
Mhm.
And it's just, and then, they're twisting and to get a
Mhm.
hole in your bone and all. And it was just a really weird feeling. I said, the bad news is when the pain came, it was an 11. It was extreme. I said, but the good news is, number one, it only happened when they were pulling the bone marrow out. So it lasted like 2 seconds. And number two, the second they stopped pulling it out, the pain was gone. So anyway, I end up leaving. They said, "Hey, your car's ready," and they drove me home. About an hour later, I get a call from uh, the organization that set this up for them is called the ShareNet. And this woman on there she calls, she says, "Hey, did you make it home safe?" Yeah. She says, I got to tell you how great it went and this and that and all that. And she says, but shortly after you left, this woman, mind you, an executive at one of the biggest pharmaceuticals, came up to me in tears and said, Where's Mike? Can I talk to him?" And she said, "Oh, he's already left." So I said, is she around now? She said, "No." She said she literally hadn't slept in 3 days because she was so
Mhm.
scared of this. And now, because of what I said, she was going home and she knew she was going to be able to sleep. And like, what an incredible feeling, right? You
So
know,
she was going to be having the bone marrow,
she
a
was
bone
having a
marrow.
bone marrow
Yeah.
biopsy. I didn't know, what cancer it was for or anything
Right.
like that. And what an incredible feeling. And, even, they said, "Oh, this was great. They want you back." And I've done it many times. And I said, you need to understand something. I get to stand up here and thank people who saved my life. And how often do you get to thank, someone who saved your life, your heroes? And it was at least as impactful for me as it was for them. I can promise you that.
Yeah. That's incredible. That is incredible.
It's yeah, and again, it's finding good and bad, it's pulling a positive out of there's so many people, and it still happens, that get depressed. They don't do anything, they don't talk, they don't socialize, they just go through the treatment. Woe is me, it's not fair, and so it's really nice and so incredibly impactful to me when I could do something like that.
So, what would change if every company or hospital or research institute had real patient voices at the table? And how could it help to inform even clinical trials, do you think?
So that's a great question. And even with the two trials I was on, right? I knew what cytokine release syndrome was after the first one.
Right.
But if they had said to me, um, uh, Mike, you may start feeling pain, and it's good, right? And the more pain, the better. And here's why. When it
Mhm.
connects this to this, it releases the cytokine, it kills the cancer. And it's those messages now that I try to get back to the pharmaceuticals, either in casual conversations or I'm on three separate patient advisory boards, um, to say, hey, listen, this is such an important thing to let them know, right? Because not that it would have hurt any less, but I'll tell you something psychologically, in my brain, as bad as it hurt, I would have been saying, keep it coming. I just a little bit more. If this is killing my cancer, I could take it. Give just another 5 minutes, another 5 minutes. And it would have made a huge difference, right? In
Mhm.
that first one. The second one, it wasn't quite as bad and all, but again, I knew what was happening. I knew what cytokine release was. So, being able you know, to bring messages from the pure patient. By that I mean, not a pharmaceutical person who has cancer, right? Because they're
Mhm.
in a different world, right?
Right.
They've got everything around them. They know everything about, and what they don't have in their company, they've got, connections and such to people, in pharmaceuticals throughout the world. So I think by bringing patients in and and letting patients educate them, I think it will, and to an extent already has made some changes in how the pharmaceutical industry kind of works with patients, deals with patients, and deals with patient issues.
Mhm. Do you think if you'd been told that you might feel that kind of pain during the process, it would have scared you away from it at all?
No, so like if they said you might feel a lot of pain, I would have probably thought about it. If they said the pain is your cancer being killed, right? There's, I don't think there's anything that would have stopped me from doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, right, worst case is best case. Worst case, the pain is extreme, but that's the best case because that means more cancer is being killed.
Right. So you could think of it positively, even though it
Right.
was the worst
And
pain.
that's, what you're saying there is really key is trying to bring a positive to the situation, right? And trying to teach the pharmaceuticals that they need to do the same thing there's, I mean, you would never want them to lie and say, you know what, most people, they're treated after this and everything's going to be 100% okay. But
Right.
sharing things like this, sharing experiences of other cancer patients, truly, helps others that are going to be going through that process.
Yeah. Yeah. It's important information.